Look around the room you are in right now. The soap by the sink, the candles on the shelf, the paint on the walls, the tires on the car outside, the food in your pet's bowl. Many of these everyday things share one hidden ingredient, and it comes from an industry almost nobody thinks about, sees, or can even name. An industry that quietly recycles billions of pounds of material a year and generates around $10 billion of economic activity in the United States alone. That industry is rendering. And a rendering plant is one of the strangest businesses on earth because it gets paid to take away what everyone else desperately needs to get rid of, and then gets paid again for what it makes out of it. So you want to own a rendering plant. By the end of this video, you will know what a rendering plant actually does, how it earns money coming and going on the same material, and why this quiet, unglamorous business is one of the most stable and essential recycling operations in the entire economy. Start with what a rendering plant is, because it is really a giant, specialized recycling machine. Rendering is a cooking and drying process. You take animal byproducts, the fat, bone, and material left over from meat and poultry production, and you cook it at high temperatures to separate it into two basic things: fat, which becomes grease and tallow, and dried protein, which becomes meal. That is the entire core of the business. So what you are buying is an industrial plant built around huge cookers, grinders, presses, and centrifuges run at very high temperatures with the controls to process enormous volumes safely and consistently. This is heavy, hot, specialized machinery, not a simple warehouse. There are two basic kinds: packer renderers, which sit next to a slaughterhouse and process only that facility's byproducts, and independent renderers, which run trucks out to collect raw material from many sources: butcher shops, supermarkets, restaurants, farms, and processors. There are only around 300 rendering plants in all of North America. And this is capital heavy. The cookers, the odor control systems, the trucks, and the environmental equipment cost real money, and the plant runs continuously. You are not buying a small operation. You are buying essential infrastructure that the entire meat industry quietly depends on. So the plant is yours. Here is what you have actually taken on. First, you inherit a supply problem that is really a supply gift. Every slaughterhouse, butcher, and supermarket produces byproducts they cannot sell and must legally dispose of. To them, it is a costly problem. To you, it is raw material they will actually pay you to take away. Second, you inherit the responsibility to move fast. Raw animal material spoils quickly, especially in heat, creating odor and health risks. So a renderer runs a tight collection and processing schedule, picking up daily and cooking quickly, because the raw material is a clock that starts ticking the moment it is produced. Third, you inherit heavy regulation. Because this material can carry disease, the industry is tightly controlled, especially since mad cow disease reshaped the rules on what rendered products can go back into which animal feeds. Compliance is not optional here. It is the license to exist, and it shapes what you can make and sell. And fourth, you inherit the odor and the image. Rendering smells and plants are often unwelcome neighbors, which means constant investment in odor control and a location usually far from town. You are running an essential but unglamorous business that most people would rather not know exists, let alone live beside. So how does a rendering plant actually make money? It earns on both ends and then again in the middle. Layer 1 is the collection fee. This is the first payday, the one that makes rendering so unusual. Producers of animal waste pay you to haul it away because it is cheaper and cleaner than any other legal disposal. You are paid up front just to accept the raw material that becomes your product. Layer 2 is the fat. Cooking separates out grease and tallow, valuable commodities sold by the ton, into a huge range of uses: animal feed, soap and candles, industrial lubricants, and increasingly, biodiesel and renewable diesel, where rendered fat has become a sought-after low-carbon fuel feedstock. The fat alone touches dozens of industries. Layer 3 is the protein meal. The dried, ground protein, meat and bone meal, and poultry meal is sold as a high-protein ingredient for animal feed, pet food, and fertilizer. On top comes specialty products: blood meal, feather meal, refined fats, each with its own market. One load becomes many products, each sold to a different buyer. So the revenue model is rare. You are paid to take the material in. You are paid for the fat you extract, you are paid for the protein you dry, and you are paid for the specialty products on the side. 4 revenue streams, all flowing from material the rest of the world was desperate to throw away. Here is the fact that reframes this entire invisible business. You would assume a business built on waste nobody wants would be marginal, barely profitable, scraping by. It is the opposite. Rendering is one of the most stable, essential recycling industries in the entire economy, quietly recycling billions of pounds of material a year that would otherwise have to be buried or burned at enormous cost. Listen to that again. Rendered animal products are in soaps, candles, paints, lubricants, rubber, plastics, cosmetics, pet food, animal feed, fertilizer, and biofuel. This one obscure industry that almost nobody can name is woven invisibly through the everyday products of modern life. You have used its output today without knowing it existed. And that is the quiet strength of the business. Its raw material is produced whether the economy is up or down, because people always eat meat, and its products feed into so many industries that demand never disappears. A rendering plant sits at the center of a circular economy, turning an unavoidable waste stream into an unending supply of useful commodities. So let us run the real books, because the costs are as unusual as the revenue. On the cost side, first, energy. Rendering means cooking huge volumes of material at high temperatures around the clock. Fuel and power to run those cookers is one of the largest ongoing expenses, and it rises and falls with energy prices, directly squeezing the margin. Second, collection and transport. Running a fleet of trucks out to hundreds of suppliers daily over long distances burns fuel and labor constantly. The logistics of gathering raw material fast enough before it spoils is a major and permanent cost of the model. Third, environmental and odor control. Scrubbers, filters, wastewater treatment, and compliance systems to control the smell and meet strict environmental rules are expensive to install and to run. Get this wrong, and you face fines, lawsuits, and shutdown. So it is a cost you can never cut. It is the price of being allowed to operate at all. And on the revenue side, the exposure. Prices of tallow, grease, and protein meal are global commodities, and they swing. When fat and meal prices are high, a rendering plant is a money machine. When they fall, the same plant with the same costs can be squeezed hard. You control your process, but not the price of what you make. And that leads to the trap in this otherwise stable business. Its trap is a squeeze from two directions at once. Your revenue rides on volatile commodity prices for fat and meal, which you cannot control. And your costs, energy, transport, and compliance tend to rise steadily and rarely fall. When product prices drop while energy prices climb, the margin can vanish fast. A deeper trap is regulation and reputation. A single disease scare, a contamination event, or a tightening of the rules on what rendered material can be used for can wipe out a market overnight. When mad cow rules changed which proteins could go into which feeds, it reshaped product values across the whole industry instantly. So the owner who fails treats rendering like a simple waste business and ignores the two things that actually rule it: the swing of commodity prices and the weight of regulation. That plant can run flawlessly, cook perfectly, collect efficiently, and still be squeezed into losses by forces entirely outside the fence line. It helps to see that rendering is not new. It may be the oldest recycling industry on Earth. For as long as people have raised and eaten animals, someone has boiled down the leftover fat and bone into tallow for candles and soap. Rendering is one of humanity's oldest ways of making sure nothing from an animal went to waste. What changed was the scale. As cities and meatpacking grew huge, the volume of byproducts became enormous, and rendering industrialized to match. Today, it quietly recycles the byproducts of an entire nation's meat supply, keeping billions of pounds of material out of landfills every year and turning what would be a huge disposal crisis into fuel, feed, and everyday goods. That is the real weight of this business. Without renderers, the meat industry would be buried in its own byproducts, and the cost of disposing of them safely would ripple through the price of everything. And the reason nobody thinks about rendering is that it works so well and so quietly that the problem it solves has become invisible. So how does a rendering plant actually fail? Rarely for lack of material. Picture the common failure. An operator buys or builds a plant when tallow and meal prices are high, and the numbers look fantastic. Raw material is cheap and plentiful, the products sell strong, and every load turns a solid profit. It looks like a license to print money. Then the cycle turns. Global fat and protein prices slide, while energy and compliance costs keep climbing. That same plant that printed money now barely breaks even on every ton. If the operator borrowed heavily to build at the top, the debt payments do not care that the market fell, and the squeeze becomes a slow bleed. Add a regulatory shock or an odor complaint that forces expensive upgrades, and a stable business becomes a losing one. That plant did nothing wrong. It cooked, collected, and complied. But commodity prices, energy costs, and regulation, the three forces it never controlled, closed in together, and a business built on certainty was undone by things outside the fence. So who actually builds a lasting rendering business? The survivors understand that rendering is a commodity processing business wrapped in heavy logistics and regulation, and they build for the down cycle, not just the up one. They keep debt manageable, run efficient plants, and never assume high prices will last. First, they lock in supply and drive down energy use. They secure steady raw material from reliable suppliers, and they invest in efficient cookers and heat recovery, because in a business where energy is a top cost, every bit of efficiency is margin that survives when prices fall. Second, they diversify their products and markets. Rather than depending on one buyer or one use, they sell into feed, into fuel, into industrial markets, and into fertilizer, so that when one market weakens, another holds them up. A move into biodiesel and renewable fuel has opened a powerful new outlet for rendered fat. And third, they treat compliance and community relations as core strategy, not a nuisance. They invest early and heavily in odor and environmental control, because plants that get shut down are the ones that cut corners, and the plants that last are the ones the regulators and neighbors can live with. So does owning a rendering plant actually work? Run both sides, the good version. You run an efficient plant with low energy use, secure supply, and diversified markets, and you invest in compliance so nothing shuts you down. You get paid to collect, paid for fat, paid for protein, and paid for specialty products, all from material nobody else wanted. You own a stable, essential, quietly profitable recycling business that the whole meat economy depends on. The bad version, you built at the top of the market on heavy debt. Then commodity prices fell while energy and compliance costs rose. A regulatory shock forced expensive upgrades. Your single market weakened, and the squeeze became a loss on every ton. The plant ran perfectly, and the forces outside the fence still bled it dry. So the honest verdict: a rendering plant is one of the most stable, essential, and quietly fascinating recycling businesses in the entire economy. But it is not a simple waste operation. It is a commodity processor, a logistics machine, and a regulated utility all at once, paid coming and going, yet exposed to prices and rules it cannot control. Run it lean, diversified, and clean, and it is a quiet money machine hiding in plain sight. Here is the thing to remember: the next time you wash your hands, light a candle, or feed your pet, something in your daily life almost certainly passed through a rendering plant. A quiet factory far from town that took in what the world could not use and turned it invisibly into the ordinary products all around you. You have been a customer of this industry your whole life without ever knowing its name. That waste was never really waste. It was raw material waiting for the one industry patient and specialized enough to unlock it. And a rendering plant is just the quiet machine that does, earning on both ends of something everyone else just wanted gone. Disposal was never the point. The reclamation always was. Nothing was thrown away. It was quietly gathered, cooked down, and sent back out into the world as 1,000 ordinary things by the oldest and most invisible recycling business there is.